The parade ground at Fort Bragg was silent in the way that only 200 combat veterans could make it silent. Not the quiet of absence, but the deliberate stillness of men who'd learned in 100 different wars that sometimes you shut your mouth and watch what happened next. Jonas Kellerman stood in the shadows beyond the perimeter lights, his back against the rough brick of the old ordnance building. 67 years old, and he could still disappear when he needed to. Still move through a crowd without disturbing the air. Some skills you didn't lose no matter how many decades passed. The October wind cut across the North Carolina plains carrying the smell of diesel fuel and gun oil. Familiar smells, the smells of every military base he'd ever set foot on, from Normandy to Pusan to a dozen black sites that didn't have names. He watched the tribunal form up under the arc lights. 3 folding tables arranged in a horseshoe. Behind them, 3 men in their 50s and 60s, all wearing the same expression of controlled authority that came from giving orders and expecting them followed. Colonel Vincent Dennison sat center, his silver hair cut military sharp, his uniform pressed with creases that could draw blood. 58 years old and still carrying himself like the battalion commander he'd been before he'd taken over the Fort Bragg chapter of the order. On his left, Colonel Garrett from the northern chapter, face hard as granite scars visible, even at this distance. On his right, some western chapter commander Jonas didn't recognize. Younger. Probably appointed after Jonas had disappeared. 15 years. That's how long it had been since Jonas Kellerman had set foot on order ground. 15 years since he'd walked away from the organization he'd helped build, the brotherhood he'd bled for, the code he'd sworn to uphold. He'd thought he was done, thought he'd earned his peace. He'd been wrong. The crowd shifted and Jonas's attention snapped to the center of the parade ground. 2 soldiers in fatigues dragged a woman forward. Not a woman, really, a girl. 20-something, thin as a fence post, wearing jeans that had been patched so many times they were more thread than denim, a flannel shirt 3 sizes too big, and no shoes. No shoes in October, in North Carolina. Jonas felt something cold settle in his chest. The guards shoved her forward, and she stumbled, caught herself straightened. Her hair was dark red, tangled, hanging past her shoulders. Her face was smudged with dirt and what might have been old bruises. But she stood straight, kept her chin up, looked Colonel Dennison right in the eye. Jonas knew that face. Not because he'd met her, he hadn't, but he'd seen photographs, dozens of them spanning 24 years, baby pictures, school photos from the 1 year she'd actually attended school, surveillance shots from when she'd started drifting back toward Fort Bragg 6 months ago. He'd never approached her, never let her see him, never interfered, until now. "State your name," Dennison's voice carried across the parade ground with parade ground precision. The girl didn't flinch. "Marlo Kaine." A murmur went through the crowd. Some of the older veterans shifted, glanced at each other. The name meant something. To those who remembered, Dennison leaned forward slightly. "Marlo Kaine. No chapter affiliation, no service record, no family connection to the order. My father was Richard Kaine." Her voice was steady, strong. "Captain Richard Kaine. He served with the 82nd Airborne, transferred to OSECS in '43, awarded Silver Star at Normandy, Purple Heart at Bastogne, and died in a training accident at this base in 1948. The murmur grew louder, more men shifting, more glances exchanged. Dennison's expression didn't change. "Captain Kaine is not listed in our chapter rolls. Because you erased him." Marlo's hands were fists at her sides. "After you killed him." The parade ground went dead silent. Jonas felt his jaw tighten. The girl had courage. Stupid courage, maybe, but courage nonetheless. Dennison stood slowly. "That is a serious accusation, Miss Kaine. Do you have evidence to support it?" "I have his journals, his investigation notes, his final report before he died." "And where are these documents?" Marlo hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Dennison smiled, not a pleasant smile. "You don't have them here, do you? Perhaps you left them in the bunker where we found you, the abandoned munitions bunker on the eastern perimeter, the one that's been off limits since the '50s. Movement at the edge of the crowd. A blonde woman in a crisp uniform stepped forward, holding up a clear plastic evidence bag. Even from this distance, Jonas could see what was inside. Small glass vials, papers with Cyrillic script. The blonde woman was maybe 30, beautiful in the way that predators were beautiful. All sharp angles and calculated grace. Jonas didn't need to ask who she was. He'd been tracking her for 2 months. Octavia Dennison, the colonel's daughter. This was found in Miss Kaine's possession. Octavia's voice was cold, professional. 6 cyanide capsules in medical vials. 12 pages of coded communication matching known Soviet cipher patterns. And this. She held up a photograph. Jonas couldn't see the details from here, but he could guess. A photograph taken 3 weeks ago of a Soviet handler meeting with an unknown contact in Fayetteville. We believe Miss Kaine is that contact. The crowd's mood shifted. Silence turned to anger, angry murmurs. Hands moving to weapons that weren't there. Marlo's face had gone pale. That's not mine. I've never seen any of that before. It was hidden in the bunker where you were living. Octavia moved closer, the circling like a shark. The same bunker where classified order documents were stored before it was decommissioned. Documents that have been missing for months. I didn't take anything. I didn't. You were found in a restricted area. Dennison's voice cut through Marlo's protest. In possession of classified materials and enemy contraband. By the laws of the order, you stand accused of espionage and treason. Marlo looked around the crowd, searching for a friendly face, for anyone who might speak for her. No one moved. Jonas felt the cold thing in his chest spread to his limbs. He'd seen this before. Seen the order turn on one of their own. Seen good men destroyed by accusations and politics, and the kind of corruption that grew in any organization that operated outside official oversight. He'd seen it happen to Richard Kaine, He wasn't going to watch it happen to Richard's daughter. The penalty for treason is death. Dennison looked out at the assembled veterans. But we are not savages. We follow the old code. Trial by ordeal. 3 challenges. If Miss Kaine survives all 3, she will be judged innocent and granted full chapter protection. He paused, let the words sink in. If she fails even 1 challenge, she will be executed as a traitor and buried in an unmarked grave. Marlo swayed slightly. For the first time, Jonas saw fear break through her composure. Colonel Garrett stepped forward. The man was 45, massive and scarred with knuckles that looked like they'd been rebuilt after breaking on too many faces. I'll take first challenge. Garrett's voice was eager. Hand to hand. Tomorrow at dawn. Dennison nodded. Accepted. Miss Kaine, you have until sunrise to prepare. Marlo opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I can't fight Colonel Garrett. I don't have training. I don't have... Then you should have thought of that before you betrayed us. Octavia smiled. Guards escort Miss Kaine to holding. The 2 soldiers grabbed Marlo's arms, started dragging her toward the detention building. Jonas pushed off from the wall, old, tired. 3 bullet wounds that ached in cold weather and a knee that had never been the same since Pusan. But some debts didn't expire. He stepped into the light. The effect was immediate. The soldiers dragging Marlo stopped. The crowd turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Jonas walked forward. Not fast, not slow. The same measured pace he'd used walking into 100 different dangerous situations. The pace that said he knew exactly where he was and exactly what he was doing, and if you had a problem with that, you could step up and say so. No one stepped up. He was wearing civilian clothes. Black slacks, black shirt, black jacket. Nothing military about the outfit except the way he wore it. Straight spine, square shoulders, eyes that swept the crowd and cataloged every face, every weapon, every potential threat. Kellerman. The whisper started at the edge of the crowd and rippled inward. The Phantom. He's supposed to be dead. I heard he was in a VA hospital. I heard he went crazy living in the mountains. Jonas ignored them, kept walking until he stood 10 feet from the tribunal table. Colonel Dennison had gone very still. His face showed nothing, but Jonas had known the man for 30 years. Knew the tells, the slight tightening around the eyes, the way his right hand moved an inch closer to the service pistol on his belt. Jonas Kellerman. Dennison's voice was carefully neutral. This is unexpected. Vincent. Jonas didn't bother with rank or titles. They were past that. You're making a mistake. Am I? The girl's innocent. You have evidence to support that claim. I have 24 years of watching her, protecting her, making sure she survived despite your best efforts to erase her existence. A muscle jumped in Dennison's jaw. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Jonas glanced at Octavia. And so does she. The bunker where you found Marlo isn't abandoned. It's a dead drop. Has been for 15 years. You've been using it to store materials before passing them to your Soviet contacts. Octavia's face hardened. That's absurd. Is it because I have photographs, dates, times, license plates? I've been watching that bunker for 6 months. Everything documented and locked away safe. If anything happens to me or the girl, it goes to Army intelligence, FBI, and the Washington Post. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Dennison spoke. What do you want? Right of champion, Article 7 of the old code. Garrett stepped forward. Article 7 hasn't been invoked in 20 years. Then it's about time. Jonas turned to look at Marlo. The girl was staring at him like he'd dropped from the sky. Marlo Kaine, do you accept my protection? She hesitated. Jonas could see the wheels turning. She didn't know him, had no reason to trust him, every reason to be suspicious. But she was also smart enough to recognize her only chance. Yes. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, I accept. Jonas turned back to Dennison. Terms, I fight 3 challenges in her place. I win, she's declared innocent and granted full chapter rights. I lose, we both die. You're pushing 70 Kellerman. Garrett's voice was incredulous. You really think you can survive 3 combat trials? Jonas looked at him, didn't smile, didn't blink. I survived Normandy, Bastogne, Poussin, and 15 years in the mountains with people trying to kill me. You think 3 challenges from the order scare me? Garrett's face flushed red. Dennison held up a hand. The terms are accepted. Jonas Kellerman will face 3 challenges on behalf of Marlo Kaine. First challenge, hand-to-hand combat against Colonel Garrett. Tomorrow at dawn, no weapons, no armor, no interference. He looked at Jonas, something cold and calculating in his eyes. I hope you know what you're doing, old friend. So do I, Vincent. So do I. The tribunal dismissed. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. Jonas walked to where the guards still held Marlo. Release her. She's under my protection now. The guards looked at Dennison. The colonel nodded. They let go. Marlo rubbed her arms where they'd been gripping. Up close, Jonas could see the full extent of her condition. Malnourished, exhausted, running on fumes and stubbornness. Come on. Jonas started walking toward the parking lot. We need to talk. Marlo followed. She didn't have much choice. Jonas reached his truck, a 1947 Ford pickup, restored, maintained, reliable. He opened the passenger door. Marlo stood on the pavement looking at him with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Who are you? Someone who knew your father. My father died when I was a baby. I know, I was there. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine. It caught on the first try the way it always did. Marlo stood there for another few seconds. Then she climbed in. Jonas put the truck in gear and drove. Neither of them spoke for the first 10 minutes. Jonas kept his eyes on the road, checking mirrors, watching for tails. Old habits. Finally, Marlo broke the silence. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't look for you. Why are you helping me? Jonas was quiet for a long moment. Trees flashed past the windows. The road wound up into the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Because I made a promise to your father that if anything happened to him, I'd protect his family. And I've already broken it once. I'm not breaking it again. What promise? You said you were there when he died. I was. The official report said training accident, grenade malfunction during exercises. The official report lied. Then what really happened? Jonas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The old scars on his knuckles stood out white against weathered skin. Your father was murdered by Colonel Dennison because Richard found out what Dennison was doing. Found proof that Dennison was selling order intelligence to Soviet handlers. Found the bank accounts, the dead drops, the whole network. He glanced at Marlo. Her face had gone very pale. Richard tried to report it through proper channels, tried to bring evidence to the other chapter commanders. But Dennison had people everywhere, had contingencies. The night before Richard was supposed to testify, there was an accident during training exercises. And you just let it happen. Her voice was sharp, angry. I didn't know until it was too late. By the time I figured out what Dennison had done, Richard was buried and you were barely a year old and your mother was already dying of grief. Jonas took a breath, let it out slow. I tried to expose Dennison, tried to bring him down, but he was too powerful, too connected. And I was just one man. So I made a choice. I disappeared, went off the grid. Figured if I couldn't beat Dennison, at least I could make sure you survived. By watching from a distance. By making sure no one ever found you. By making sure you had food when you needed it, shelter when you couldn't find it, protection when you didn't know you needed protecting. Marlo was silent for a long time. The cabin I found last winter, the one that had canned goods and blankets and firewood already stacked. That was you. Yes. The hunters who tried to corner me in the woods, they just disappeared one day. Yes. The jobs I got in town, even though I had no references, no history, someone vouched for me. Jonas didn't answer. Didn't need to. Marlo turned back to face the windshield. Her jaw was set, her hands clenched in her lap. Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you just take me in, raise me yourself? Because I'm a weapon, Marlo, not a father. I've killed more men than I can count. I've done things that would keep you awake at night. Your father wanted better for you than that. My father's dead. I don't have better. You had a chance at normal, at civilian life. I wasn't going to take that away. The truck climbed higher into the mountains. The road narrowed. Trees pressed close on both sides. Finally, Jonas turned onto an unmarked dirt road. Half a mile later, they arrived at a cabin. Small, weathered, tucked into a clearing that you'd never find unless you knew exactly where to look. Jonas killed the engine. We'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow morning, we go back to Fort Bragg. I fought Garrett, and we start the process of clearing your name and destroying Dennison. Marlo looked at the cabin, then at Jonas. You really think you can beat Garrett? He's 20-some years younger than you. He's a hand-to-hand combat instructor. He's predictable. Jonas opened his door, and he's never fought anyone who learned to kill before he was born. He climbed out. The mountain air was cold and clean, smelled like pine and old earth. Marlo got out on her side. I don't understand any of this. I don't understand why Dennison wants me dead. I don't understand why you're risking your life for me. I don't understand. You don't have to understand everything tonight. Jonas headed for the cabin door. You just have to trust that I know what I'm doing. Do you? Jonas unlocked the door. The cabin was dark inside, but he knew every inch of it. Had lived here for 15 years. Ask me again after tomorrow's fight. He stepped inside. After a moment, Marlo followed. The cabin was simple. One main room with a kitchen area, a wood stove, a table, 2 chairs, a bedroom off to the side, bathroom with a pump sink. No electricity, but there were oil lamps. No phone, no radio, no connection to the outside world. Jonas lit a lamp. Warm light filled the space. Marlo stood in the doorway, taking it all in. You've been living here for 15 years. More or less. Sometimes I travel, but this is home base. He moved to the kitchen area, started pulling out food. Canned soup, bread, nothing fancy. There's a bedroom. You should sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Marlo didn't move. I can't sleep. Not before you tell me everything. Jonas set the soup can down, turned to look at her. She was young, scared, alone. Everything her father had been afraid she'd become. And she was also strong, determined. Standing in this cabin demanding answers instead of breaking down. Richard's daughter, no question about that. Sit down, Jonas pulled out a chair. I'll tell you everything, but it's going to take a while. Marlo sat. Jonas poured soup into a pot, set it on the wood stove to heat. Then he sat across from her. Your father and I met in 1942. He was 28, fresh out of jump school, full of fire, and absolutely convinced he was going to win the war single-handed. I was pushing 50, but volunteering for the OSS anyway. Jonas smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. We ended up in the same unit, dropped behind German lines 3 days before D-Day. Our job was to sabotage communications, create chaos, make the Germans think the invasion was coming somewhere else. He stared at his hands, the scars, the age spots, the tremor that appeared sometimes when he was tired. We got separated from the main unit, spent 2 weeks behind enemy lines, just the 2 of us and a radio operator named Chen, living in ditches, stealing food, killing sentries in the dark. The soup started to bubble. Jonas got up, stirred it. Richard saved my life 4 times in those 2 weeks. I saved his 3. By the time we made it back to Allied lines, we were brothers. Not in blood, but in every way that mattered. He poured soup into 2 bowls, set one in front of Marlo. She didn't touch it. After the war, we both joined the order. It was different back then, smaller, more focused. We were supposed to be watchdogs, making sure returning veterans didn't get forgotten, making sure benefits got distributed, making sure the skills we'd learned overseas got put to good use, protecting the home front. Jonas sat down, ate a spoonful of soup. But organizations grow. Power corrupts. By the 50s, the order was running operations that had nothing to do with helping veterans. We were doing CIA, wet work, FBI surveillance, political intimidation. We became what we'd fought against. And my father tried to stop it. Your father believed in honor, integrity, the code we'd sworn. When he found out Dennison was selling secrets, he couldn't let it go. Jonas met Marlo's eyes. Neither could I. But I was smarter about it. I stayed quiet, gathered evidence, waited for the right moment. Your father was impatient. He wanted justice immediately. And it got him killed. Yes. Marlo finally picked up her spoon. Ate a little soup. She looked like she hadn't had a proper meal in days. Why now? She asked after a while. Why come back after 15 years? Because Dennison's gotten sloppy or desperate. 6 months ago, I noticed you'd come back to the Fort Bragg area, started following you, started watching. And I saw Octavia meeting with her Soviet contact, saw them planting evidence in the bunker, saw them setting you up. He finished his soup, set the bowl aside. I knew if I didn't act, you'd end up like your father, dead in an unmarked grave. And I've already got too many ghosts following me around. Marlo set down her spoon. Her hands were shaking slightly. What happens tomorrow, really? Tomorrow I fight Garrett. Hand to hand, no weapons until one of us can't continue. Can you win? Jonas stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dark trees, the stars barely visible through the canopy. I've got arthritis in both knees. My right shoulder doesn't rotate like it used to, and I can't see as sharp as I could 10 years ago. He turned back to her. But I've been fighting since before Garrett was born. I know tricks he's never seen. I know how to make a younger, stronger opponent beat himself. And if I can win 2 challenges, there's an old provision, Article 12. I can present evidence instead of fighting the third. It's not guaranteed, but it's there. And if you lose, then you run. I've got Map's money contacts. You disappear and you never look back. I'm not running. Yes, you are. Because if I fall, Dennison wins. And I'm not letting you die for pride. Marlo stood, crossed to where Jonas was standing. She was small next to him, barely came up to his shoulder. But there was steel in her spine. My father died fighting Dennison. You're about to risk your life fighting Dennison. I'm not running away and letting that sacrifice mean nothing. Jonas looked down at her, saw Richard in her eyes, that same stubborn refusal to back down. You're just like him, you know that. Good. They stood there for a moment, 2 people connected by ghosts and promises. Finally, Jonas spoke. Get some sleep. I need to prepare. Marlo nodded, headed for the bedroom. At the door, she paused. Jonas. Yes, thank you for keeping your promise, even if it took 24 years. She disappeared into the bedroom. Closed the door. Jonas stood alone in the main room. The oil lamp flickered. Shadows danced on the walls. Tomorrow, Colonel Garrett was going to learn that age and treachery beat youth and strength. Every single time. Dawn came cold and gray to Fort Bragg. Jonas had been awake for 3 hours. Old habit. In the war, you rose before the enemy. Gave yourself time to think, to prepare, to make sure your head was where it needed to be before the shooting started. He stood in the cabin clearing and moving through exercises that were older than most of the men he'd be facing today. Slow, deliberate movements. Stretching muscles that protested every morning now. Testing joints that had been broken and healed, and broken again. The body didn't lie, he was old. Slower than he'd been at 40, at 50, even at 60. His right knee clicked when he pivoted. His left shoulder had a reduced range of motion from a bullet wound in Korea. His hands, when he made fists, didn't close as tight as they once had. But his mind was sharp, and in a fight, the mind mattered more than people thought. He heard the cabin door open behind him. Marlo stepped out wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Her hair was pulled back now, her face washed. She looked younger in the morning light, and more afraid. You should eat something, she said. Already did, 2 hours ago. She watched him move through another sequence. A block and a strike, a throw that ended with him on one knee in the dirt. You're really going to do this? Yes. Garrett's going to try to kill you. Jonas stood, brushed dirt from his pants. He's going to try by. That's not reassuring. It's honest. Jonas walked to where he'd left a canteen of water. Drank. Reassurance is a lie people tell themselves before they do something stupid. I'm not stupid. I know exactly what I'm walking into. Marlo crossed her arms. Then why do it? Because your father would have done it for me. He checked his watch. 5:30. The fight was scheduled for 6. Half an hour to drive back to Fort Bragg. Get in the truck. Time to go. The drive was quiet. Jonas kept his focus on the road, on the plan, on the fight ahead. Marlo sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her fingers drumming against her thigh. As they approached the base, Jonas spoke. When we get there, stay back. Don't interfere no matter what happens. Dennison will be looking for any excuse to disqualify me. And if you lose, there's a key in the glove box, safe deposit box in Asheville. Inside is money, documents, contacts, everything you need to disappear. Marlo opened the glove box, found the key, turned it over in her hands. I don't want to disappear. Wanting and surviving are different things. Remember that. They reached the main gate. The guards waved them through. Jonas drove to the parade ground, parked in the same spot he'd used yesterday. The crowd was already gathering, bigger than last night. Word had spread. The Phantom was back. The Phantom was fighting. Jonas climbed out of the truck. The morning air smelled like coffee and anticipation. Men stood in clusters, talking in low voices, placing bets. Jonas ignored them, kept walking toward the center of the parade ground where a circle had been marked in white paint, 20 feet in diameter. Dennison sat at the tribunal table flanked by Garrett and the Western commander. Octavia stood off to the side, watching Jonas with cold calculation. Jonas stopped at the edge of the circle. Colonel Garrett was already there, stripped to the waist, doing shoulder rolls. The man was massive. 6'2", maybe 220. All of it muscle and scar tissue. Garrett saw Jonas and grinned. "Morning, old man. Sleep well?" "Well enough." "Good. I'd hate for you to have any excuses when this is over." Jonas said nothing. He pulled off his jacket, then his shirt. The morning cold hit his skin like a slap. The crowd got quiet. Jonas was no longer the fighter he'd been in his prime. His skin was looser, marked with age spots. His muscles were corded and lean rather than bulked. His chest and stomach showed every rib. But the scars told a different story. Bullet wounds across his abdomen, a knife slash along his ribs, burns on his left shoulder, old shrapnel marks scattered across his back, and cutting through all of it, a surgical scar that ran from sternum to navel. This wasn't a body that had gotten old in an office. This was a body that had been through wars and somehow kept functioning. Garrett's grin faded slightly. Dennison stood. "The rules are simple. Hand-to-hand combat, no weapons, no biting, no eye gouging. Fight continues until one combatant yields, is rendered unconscious, or is unable to continue." "Are the terms understood?" "Yes," Garrett said. "Yes," Jonas said. "Then take your positions." Jonas stepped into the circle. Garrett did the same, moving to the opposite side. 20 feet of white paint between them. Dennison raised his hand. "Begin." Garrett didn't wait. He came straight in, fast and aggressive. A rushing tackle, trying to use his size and momentum to drive Jonas into the ground. Jonas sidestepped. Minimal movement, just enough to let Garrett's charge pass by. As the younger man went past, Jonas brought his elbow down hard on the back of Garrett's neck. Not hard enough to cause real damage, just hard enough to send a message. "I'm faster than you think." Garrett stumbled, caught himself, spun around. His face was flushed. He came in again, this time with more control. A jab-cross combination. Jonas blocked both strikes, absorbed the impact. Garrett's fists hit like hammers. Garrett pressed forward with a knee strike. Jonas twisted, took it on his thigh instead of his gut. The impact sent a spike of pain through his leg, but he stayed upright. Another punch. Jonas slipped it. Another. Jonas deflected it. Garrett was fast, well-trained, but he was fighting the way they taught in modern combat schools. Jonas fought the way they taught him in 1940. Dirty, practical, focused on one thing. Survival. Garrett threw a hook. Jonas didn't block. Instead, he moved inside the punch, too close for it to land with power, and drove his palm into Garrett's solar plexus. The younger man's breath exploded out. He backpedaled, gasping. Jonas didn't press. He stepped back, gave Garrett space to recover. Some in the crowd booed. They wanted blood. Jonas didn't care what they wanted. Garrett got his wind back, his face dark red now. Angry. He came in harder, faster, a flurry of strikes that forced Jonas backward. Punches, elbows, knee strikes. Professional, relentless. Jonas blocked what he could, absorbed what he couldn't. Each impact drove home the reality. Garrett was stronger. One solid hit to the head or body could end this. But Garrett was also getting frustrated, getting sloppy. A wild haymaker. Jonas ducked under it, stepped in close, and swept Garrett's lead leg. The big man went down hard. The ground shook. Jonas stepped back again, gave him space. Garrett climbed to his feet, breathing hard now. 2 minutes of fighting, and he was already showing fatigue. Jonas, meanwhile, wasn't even breathing hard. "Getting tired, Colonel." Jonas's voice was calm. Garrett's answer was a roar and another charge. This time, Jonas met him head-on. They collided in the center of the circle, locked up, each trying to leverage the other off balance. Garrett was stronger. He started to drive Jonas backward. Jonas let him. Let the younger man think he was winning. Let him commit his weight and strength to the push. Then at the last second, Jonas dropped his hips, turned, and used Garrett's own momentum to throw him. A basic judo throw. Hip toss. Garrett flew through the air and landed outside the circle with a thud that could be heard across the parade ground. The referee stepped forward. "Out of bounds. Return to center." Garrett climbed to his feet. His face was now a mask of pure rage. They returned to center. This time, Garrett abandoned technique entirely. He came in swinging wild and powerful. Jonas weathered the storm. He took hits to his arms, his shoulders, his ribs. Pain blossomed with each impact. And while Garrett was swinging, he wasn't defending. Jonas waited for the opening, found it between two wild hooks. He stepped in and drove his fist into Garrett's liver. The liver shot, one of the most devastating strikes in combat. Not because it did permanent damage, but because it short-circuited the nervous system. Garrett's eyes went wide. His hands dropped. His knees buckled. He went down like a tree being felled. Jonas stood over him, breathing, steady, hands still up. The referee counted. 1, 2, 3. Garrett tried to get up, made it to his hands and knees, vomited. 4, 5, 6. Garrett's arms gave out. 7, 8, 9, 10. The referee waved his arms. Fight's over. Jonas Kellerman wins by knockout. The parade ground was silent. Jonas walked to the edge of the circle. Someone handed him a towel. He wiped sweat and blood from his face. His ribs were already bruising. He looked at Dennison. 1 down, Jonas said. What's next? Dennison stood slowly. Tomorrow, same time, second challenge will be announced tonight. Jonas pulled his shirt back on. His hands were shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. He forced them steady. Marlo appeared at his side. You won. I survived. That's different. You made it look easy. It wasn't. Jonas started walking toward the truck. And tomorrow will be harder. That afternoon, a jeep arrived at the cabin. Captain Morris from the Western chapter stepped out. Jonas, Miss Kaine. Captain. Jonas didn't relax. I have a message from the tribunal. Tomorrow's second challenge has been announced. And Morris pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket, handed it to Jonas. Jonas opened it. Read. His jaw tightened. Marlo leaned over. What is it? Tomorrow's challenge, edged weapons, combat knives, first blood or disarmor. Your opponent will be Major Thomas Hendricks, Western Chapter Knife Specialist. Morris shifted uncomfortably. For what it's worth, Jonas, a lot of us don't agree with what Dennison's doing, but we're bound by the old code. I understand. I brought something. Morris went back to the jeep, returned with a canvas bag. Training knives, rubber same weight as real blades. Figured you might want to prepare. Jonas looked at the bum, then at Morris. Thank you. Morris nodded. 6 a.m. tomorrow, same place. He got back in the jeep, drove away. Jonas opened the bag. Inside were half a dozen rubber training knives. Marlo picked one up. Can you win? Jonas selected a knife. Felt the weight. I don't know. Hendricks is 38, trained in Filipino knife fighting. Fast and technical. That's not reassuring. It's honest. Jonas moved into the clearing, started running through knife drills. His hands were slower than they'd been. His eyes weren't as sharp. In a knife fight, those things mattered. Marlo watched. Teach me. Jonas stopped. What? Teach me. How to fight with a knife. If you lose tomorrow, I need to be able to protect myself. Jonas studied her. She was serious. Knife fighting isn't something you learn in one night. Then teach me what you can. Jonas tossed her a rubber knife. She caught it awkwardly. First lesson, how you're holding it is wrong. He spent the next 2 hours teaching her. Basic grips, basic guards, how to move, how to create distance. She was clumsy at first, but she was determined. By the end, she could at least hold a proper stance. Later, they sat on the porch. Marlo spoke quietly. Tell me about him. My father. What was he really like? Jonas was quiet for a long moment. Richard understood something the rest of us didn't, that the work mattered less than why you did it. We were all good soldiers, but Richard was a good man who happened to be a soldier. There's a difference, Jonas smiled, a sad smile. He believed in duty, honor, protecting the innocent. He believed America stood for something worth dying for. And he never lost that belief, even when the rest of us got cynical. What was he like as a person? Funny. You wouldn't think it to look at him. He had this serious face, this stern way of carrying himself. But he had the driest sense of humor, could make you laugh in the middle of a firefight. Jonas looked at Marlo. He loved your mother more than anything, Elizabeth. She was a nurse in London during the Blitz. They met when Richard got wounded by shrapnel, ended up in her hospital. Marlo smiled, first real smile Jonas had seen from her. They got married in '45 right after the war ended, came back to the States together. You were born in early '48. Richard used to carry a photo of you everywhere. What happened to my mother? Jonas's expression darkened. Grief. When Richard was killed in June of '48, something broke inside her. She tried to hold on, tried to raise you, but the weight was too much. She did in March of '49. You were barely a year old. Who raised me after that? A family of hunters in the Appalachians. Good people. They kept you until you were 6. After that, Jonas trailed off. After that, you were on your own, and I watched from the shadows. Silence settled between them. I'm sorry, Jonas said finally. I should have been there. Should have taken you in. But I was afraid. Afraid Dennison would come after you if he knew you meant something to me. So you watched from far away instead? Yes. And now you're risking everything to save me. Yes. They sat together on the porch as the stars emerged. The second dawn came faster than the first. Jonas stood in the clearing moving through knife drills, each movement precise born from decades of muscle memory. The rubber training knife felt wrong in his hand. Too light, a real blade had weight, had consequence. He'd seen men die from knife wounds, fast deaths and slow ones. Major Hendricks specialized in making men die slow. The cabin door opened. Marlo stepped out. You should have slept, Jonas said. So should you. He took the coffee she offered. The heat helped chase away some of the stiffness in his joints. How's the knee, she asked. It'll hold, has to. They drove to Fort Bragg in the pre-dawn gray. The parade ground was already filling, more people than yesterday. Jonas parked, climbed out. Each step sent pain through his injured knee. The tribunal table was set up the same as yesterday. Dennison in the center, flanked by his commanders. Major Hendricks was already in the circle, stripped to the waist doing stretches. 6 feet tall, lean and corded with muscle. His arms were covered in scars, training cuts. Evidence of thousands of hours. Jonas stopped at the edge of the circle, pulled off his shirt. His bruises from yesterday had darkened overnight, purple and black across his ribs. Someone in the crowd whistled. Old man's going to get carved up. Jonas ignored them. Focused on Hendricks, the younger man noticed Jonas and nodded. Professional. Mr. Kellerman. Major. I want you to know I don't take pleasure in this. I respect what you did yesterday, but I have my orders. We all have orders, son. Some of us just choose which ones to follow. Hendricks's expression flickered. Uncertainty. A sergeant approached carrying 2 knives on a velvet cloth. Combat knives, 7-inch blades, razor sharp. Dennison examined them, nodded. Acceptable. The sergeant brought the cloth to the circle. Jonas took 1 knife, felt the weight, good balance. A killing tool. Hendricks took the other, spun it once. Dennison stood. The rules-edged weapons combat. First blood or disarm constitutes victory. Deliberate killing strikes are prohibited. Combat continues until one fighter yields or the referee determines a winner. Understood. Yes, sir, Hendricks said. Yes, Dennison, Jonas said. Take your positions. Jonas moved to his side of the circle. 20 feet of white paint between him and Hendricks. He tested his stance. His knee held. His grip on the knife was solid despite the tremor. Across the circle, Hendricks settled into a low stance. Knife held edge down Filipino style. Dennison raised his hand. Begin. Hendricks came in fast but controlled. Not rushing, this was a man who understood patience. He closed the distance to 6 feet. Then he attacked. A blur of motion, Hendricks's knife whipped toward Jonas's lead hand. Jonas pulled his hand back. The blade missed by inches. Hendricks flowed immediately into a second cut targeting Jonas's forearm. Jonas blocked with the spine of his own knife. Steel rang on steel. Hendricks pressed. A third cut, a fourth, each one precise. Jonas gave ground. Let Hendricks think he was on the defensive. 15 seconds in, and Jonas hadn't thrown a single strike. The crowd murmured. This wasn't like yesterday. Hendricks sensed it, pressed harder. His blade work was beautiful in a deadly way. Jonas blocked, deflected, moved his feet to maintain distance. Then Hendricks changed levels, dropped low and came up with a thrust toward Jonas's abdomen. Jonas twisted. The blade caught his shirt, tore fabric, missed skin by a hair. But the movement threw Jonas off balance. His bad knee buckled slightly. Hendricks saw it, immediately shifted his attack pattern, forcing Jonas to pivot on the injured leg. The next exchange happened fast. Hendricks feinted high, cut low. His blade sliced across Jonas's left forearm. Not deep, but enough. Blood welled, dripped onto the white paint. First blood. The referee stepped forward. Hold. Hendricks backed away immediately. The referee examined Jonas's arm. The cut was clean, maybe an inch long, bleeding, but not serious. First blood to Major Hendricks. Fight is no. Jonas's voice cut through. Check the rules. First blood or disarm. I didn't drop my knife. Fight continues. The referee looked at Dennison. Dennison's face was stone. The rules state first blood ends the match. The rules state first blood or disarm constitutes victory. They don't say the fight ends with first blood. Jonas turned to face the tribunal. Unless you're changing the rules mid-fight, Colonel. Silence. The crowd watched, waiting. Dennison's jaw tightened. The fight continues. The referee stepped back. Hendricks looked uncertain now. Jonas didn't give him time. He attacked. Not with technique, with raw aggression channeled into forward motion. His blade came in high. Hendricks blocked. Jonas immediately followed with a low cut. Hendricks deflected. But Jonas wasn't trying to land those strikes. He was closing distance. 4 feet between them. 3 feet. 2 feet. Too close for proper knife work now. This was grappling range. Jonas dropped his knife hand and grabbed Hendricks's knife wrist with his free hand, locked it down. Hendricks tried the same, reaching for Jonas's weapon hand. Jonas was faster. He brought his knife up not to cut, but to press the flat of the blade against Hendricks's throat. Standoff. Jonas had the blade at Hendricks's neck. Hendricks had his hand locked on Jonas's wrist. They stood frozen muscles straining. Jonas was older, weaker. Hendricks started to force the blade away. So Jonas did something Hendricks didn't expect. He dropped his own knife. Hendricks's eyes widened. In that split second of distraction, Jonas grabbed Hendricks's knife wrist with both hands. Classic joint lock. Jonas twisted hard. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Hendricks's fingers spasmed. The knife fell. Jonas caught it in midair. Before Hendricks could react, Jonas swept the younger man's legs. Hendricks went down hard. Jonas dropped a knee onto Hendricks's chest. Pressed the knife, Hendricks's own knife, against his throat. Yield. Hendricks, gasping, face twisted in pain, looked up at Jonas. Saw the knife at his throat. I yield. Jonas stood immediately. Stepped back. Dropped the knife. The referee raised his hand. Disarm and submission. Jonas Kellerman wins. The parade ground erupted in conversation. Jonas retrieved his own knife from where he'd dropped it, handed both blades to the referee. Then he walked to where Hendricks was sitting up, cradling his wrist. Jonas offered his hand. Hendricks looked at it, then took it. Jonas pulled him to his feet. Smart, Hendricks said. Dropping your weapon? I didn't see that coming. Neither did I until I did it. Hendricks laughed. Pained but genuine. You're a crazy old bastard, you know that. So I've been told. Jonas walked toward the edge of the circle. His forearm was still bleeding. Someone handed him a towel. Marlo appeared at his side. You're hurt. Barely. You dropped your knife. What if he'd been faster? He wasn't. That's not, I won. That's what matters. Jonas looked toward the tribunal. 2 down, Dennison. What's next? Dennison stood slowly. His face was unreadable. Tomorrow. Dawn. Final challenge. What's the challenge? Dennison smiled, cold and sharp. Firearms. Pistols at 50 yards. 6 shots each. Whoever lands the most hits wins. The crowd murmured. Everyone knew this was Dennison's specialty. And everyone knew about Jonas's hands, the tremor, the arthritis. At 50 yards with iron sights, steady hands were everything. Jonas said nothing, just nodded. And Jonas, Dennison's smile widened. I'll be your opponent. I think it's time we settled things. Man to man. Agreed. Jonas turned and walked away. Marlo followed. They reached the truck. Jonas's arm had stopped bleeding. He's going to kill you, Marlo said quietly. You can't beat him at 50 yards, not with your hands. Not in a straight fight, Jonas said. But I'm not planning on playing straight. They drove back to the cabin in silence. Jonas spent the afternoon at his makeshift shooting range. Paper targets at 25 and 50 yards, backstop of old sandbags. He fired round after round from his 1911 pistol, the same gun he'd carried since Korea. But knowing didn't help when his hands shook. At 25 yards, he could still group his shots. 5 rounds in a 6-inch circle. At 50 yards, the groups opened up. 12 inches, 15 inches. Some shots missed entirely. Unacceptable. Marlo sat on a stump nearby watching. Jonas fired another 6 rounds. 3 hits on target, 3 misses. He lowered the gun, stared at his hands. The tremor was worse when he was tired. I can't win this, he said quietly. Not straight up. Then we run. Right now, we disappear. Jonas shook his head. Dennison won't let it go. The only way this ends is if I beat him or die trying. Those aren't the only options. Jonas looked at her. What do you mean? Marlo stood. You said it yourself. You can't win straight up. So don't play straight. Change the game. How about? I don't know, but you're the one who taught me that rules have loopholes. Jonas was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, slow and dangerous. You're right. About what? About changing the game. Jonas holstered his pistol. Come on, we have work to do. And they spent the evening going through Jonas's files, documents he'd collected over 15 years, surveillance photos, financial records, everything he had on Dennison and Octavia's Soviet connections. This, Jonas said, spreading photographs across the table, this is what Dennison's afraid of. Not me beating him tomorrow. This. The photos showed Octavia meeting with a man in a long coat, Slavic features. Petrov, Jonas said, KGB handler working out of their DC embassy. I've got 12 meetings documented between him and Octavia over the past 8 months. How does this help you win tomorrow? It doesn't, but it gives us leverage. Jonas sorted through more documents. Dennison's been selling order intelligence for 20 years. Names, operations, safe houses. He pulled out a ledger, and here's the proof. Bank transfers, routing numbers, Swiss accounts, everything we need to destroy him. Marlo leaned over the documents. If you have all this, why wait? Why not expose him now? Because without completing the challenges and invoking Article 12, I have no standing. But if I survive 2 challenges and invoke Article 12, I can present this evidence to the tribunal. Then people have to listen. And if you lose tomorrow, Jonas met her eyes, then you take these documents. You take them to Captain Morris of the Western Chapter. He's clean. He'll know what to do. Jonas, promise me. If I fall tomorrow, you finish this. Marlo's jaw tightened. I promise. Jonas nodded, gathered the documents, locked them in a metal case, handed Marlo the key. Hide this. Somewhere they won't find it even if they search you. She took the key. Jonas checked his watch. Midnight. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But neither of them slept. Jonas spent the night cleaning his pistol, breaking it down, wiping each component, reassembling. Meditative. Marlo sat across from him watching. Tell me something, she said, about you. Not about my father, not about the order. Just you. Jonas looked up from the pistol. What do you want to know? Why did you join the OSS, the order, all of it? What made you become this? Jonas was quiet for a long time. I was born in 1895. Grew up poor in Pennsylvania. Coal mining family. I was supposed to go into the mines like my father. He ran a cloth along the barrel. But I was good at one thing. Fighting. Street fights, mostly. I was small, but I was fast, and I didn't quit. When the First World War started, I lied about my age. Said I was 24 when I was really 22. Joined up, got shipped to France in 1917. Jonas paused, old memories surfacing. I learned something in those trenches. I learned that I could stay calm when other men panicked, could think when bullets were flying, could kill when necessary and not let it break me. He reassembled the pistol. Smooth, practiced movements. Your father asked me once why I never settled down. Never married, never had kids. You know what I told him? Marlo shook her head. I told him I was already married. To the mission, to the work. And that marriage required all of me. There was nothing left over for anything else. Do you regret it? Jonas looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw a young woman who'd lost everything, survived anyway. I used to think I didn't. Used to think I'd made the right choice. But sitting here watching you, seeing what Richard's daughter became despite everything, he trailed off. I think I was wrong. I think maybe having something to fight for matters more than being good at fighting. Silence settled between them. Jonas? Yes. Don't die tomorrow. Jonas smiled, sad and tired. I'll do my best. The first light of dawn crept through the cabin windows. Jonas stood, checked his pistol one last time. Loaded the magazine, 7 rounds, federal ball ammunition. He holstered the weapon, put on his jacket. Marlo stood too. I'm coming with you. I know. They walked out to the truck together. The morning was cold and clear. Perfect shooting weather. Jonas started the engine. Today he'd find out if Article 12 still carried any weight. The smart money said no. But Jonas had never been one to listen to the smart money. He put the truck in gear and drove toward Fort Bragg, toward the final challenge, toward whatever came next. The firing range at Fort Bragg was different from the parade ground, quieter, more isolated, set back against a hillside with numbered lanes marked out to 100 yards. Jonas parked the truck and climbed out. 3 days of combat had left their mark, pain shooting through his knee with every step, ribs tender from yesterday's bruising. The crowd was smaller today, maybe 100 people. What remained were order veterans men who understood what this final challenge meant. This wasn't about entertainment. This was about power, about legitimacy. The tribunal table was set up at the 50-yard line. Dennison sat center, flanked by Colonel Garrett, still moving stiffly in the Western commander. Two firing positions had been established, side by side, separated by 10 feet. Downrange, two man-sized paper targets hung on frames, black silhouettes against white paper. Center mass marked with concentric rings. Jonas walked to the firing line. Marlo followed, staying back. She was carrying the metal case with the documents. Smart girl. Dennison stood as Jonas approached. The colonel looked confident, rested. He was wearing his dress uniform, medals displayed. Jonas, sleep well? Well enough. Good. I'd hate for you to have excuses when this is over. Dennison gestured to the range. The rules are simple. 6 shots each, fired from 50 yards. Standard 1911 pistol, iron sight, standing unsupported. Targets are scored by hits in the scoring rings. Most points wins. He paused. In the event of a tie, we continue with additional rounds until there's a clear winner. Jonas nodded. Understood. And Jonas? No tricks this time. Just you, me, and 50 yards of honest distance. Wouldn't have it any other way, Vincent. They moved to their respective firing positions. A range officer inspected both pistols. Standard 1911s, identical ammunition. Jonas loaded his weapon. The magazine slid home with a familiar click. He chambered around. His hands shook as he set the pistol on the table. Dennison noticed, smiled. The range officer raised his voice. Shooters, take your positions. You will fire 6 rounds on my command. Targets will be scored after all rounds are expended. Questions? Neither man spoke. Shooters ready. Jonas picked up his pistol, extended it toward the target. His arms were steady enough at full extension, the tremor less visible. Through the iron sights, he could see the target. 50 yards looked like a mile. He took a breath, let it out slowly. Dennison beside him was rock solid, textbook perfect. Fire when ready. Dennison fired first. The shot cracked across the range. A hole appeared in his target. Center mass, dead center of the highest scoring ring. Jonas squeezed his trigger. His pistol bucked. Downrange, his target showed a hit. Outer ring, still scoring but nowhere near Dennison's precision. Second shot. Dennison fired. Another hole punched through center mass. Jonas fired. This shot was better. Inner ring, third shot. Dennison's rhythm never changed. Another perfect hit. Jonas fired. Outer ring again. His hands were shaking worse now. Fourth shot. Dennison, center mass. Fifth shot. Dennison, center mass. Sixth shot. Dennison, center mass. 6 shots, 6 perfect hits. Jonas fired his final 3 rounds. 2 hits in the inner rings, one that barely caught the edge of the target. The range officer called ceasefire. They cleared their weapons, set them down, waited while the range officer walked down range to score. The crowd was silent. Jonas knew what the score would be. Dennison had shot perfectly. Jonas had shot like an old man with bad hands. The range officer returned with the targets. Colonel Dennison's 6 rounds fired 6 hits, total score 98 out of possible 100. A murmur from the crowd. 98 was expert level. Mr. Kellerman's 6 rounds fired 6 hits, total score 62. The murmur turned into conversation. 62 was respectable, but against 98 it wasn't close. Dennison had won. The colonel turned to Jonas. His smile was triumphant but restrained. A good effort, Jonas. Better than I expected, honestly, but not good enough. Jonas said nothing, just looked at Dennison with those cold gray eyes. Dennison's smile faded slightly. The challenge is concluded. Jonas Kellerman has failed the 3rd trial. According to the terms agreed upon, both he and Marlo Kaine forfeit their lives. He nodded to the guards. Take them into custody. Execution will be carried out at sunset per order tradition. Guards moved forward. Jonas didn't move, didn't resist, just spoke, his voice carrying across the range. I invoke Article 12. Everyone stopped. Dennison's face went pale. What? Article 12 of the old code. Trial by testimony. If a challenger completes 2 of 3 trials successfully, they may present evidence to the full tribunal in lieu of the 3rd trial. The Western chapter commander leaned forward. That's an old provision. Hasn't been used in decades. But it's still in the code, Jonas said. I completed 2 trials successfully. I have the right to present evidence. Dennison stood. The 3rd trial determines final judgment. You lost. The code says I may present evidence if I complete 2 trials. It doesn't say the 3rd trial overrides that right. Jonas turned to face the other commanders. Unless you're planning to violate the code you claim to uphold, silence. Colonel Garrett stood slowly. The man's face was still bruised. He looked at Dennison, then at Jonas. He's right. Article 12 is clear. 2 successful trials grant the right of testimony. The Western commander nodded. I concur. Dennison's jaw clenched. This is irregular. So is changing the rules mid-challenge, Jonas said. So is setting up an innocent woman with planted evidence. So is murdering a decorated veteran 24 years ago because he discovered your treason. The crowd erupted, voices shouting questions, accusations. Dennison raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice was ice. You're making serious accusations, Jonas. I hope you have proof. Jonas turned to Marlo. She stepped forward, opened the metal case. Jonas took the first folder, opened it, held up a photograph. This is Octavia Dennison meeting with Soviet KGB handler Alexei Petrov. Photograph taken 6 months ago in Raleigh. I have 11 more meetings documented. He handed the photo to Colonel Garrett. Jonas pulled out another document. Bank records showing wire transfers from a Swiss account controlled by Petrov to an account in Octavia's name. Total transfers over the past 2 years, $140,000. He handed this to the Western commander. And this, Jonas pulled out a ledger yellowed with age. Captain Richard Kaine's investigation notes from 1948, documenting Colonel Dennison's sale of order intelligence to Soviet handlers. Names, dates, amounts. Everything needed to prove Dennison has been a Soviet asset for over 20 years. Dennison stood. Those documents are fabricated. Ancient grudges and doctored evidence. Then explain the bank transfers, Jonas said. Explain the photographs. Explain why your daughter was meeting with a known KGB operative. I don't have to explain anything to you. No, but you do have to explain to them. Jonas pointed to the assembled veterans. To every man here who trusted you, who followed you, who thought they were serving their country while you sold them out to the enemy. Octavia stepped forward from the crowd. Her face was twisted with rage and fear. He's lying. Those photos are fake. The documents are. Your handwriting is in the ledger, Jonas said calmly. Notes about dead drops, payment schedules, intelligence packages. We can verify it. Octavia went silent. Dennison looked around, saw the faces of the men he'd commanded for 2 decades, saw the doubt, the anger, the betrayal. He made his choice. His hand dropped to his service pistol. Jonas was faster. The 1911 he'd fired moments ago was still in his hand. He hadn't holstered it. He raised the weapon, pointed it at Dennison. Don't. Dennison froze, hand on his pistol grip. I beat you twice already this week, Vincent. I'll beat you a 3rd time if you force me. But I'd rather not shoot an unarmed man in front of witnesses. Unarmed? Dennison's laugh was bitter. You're pointing a gun at me. Yes. And you're reaching for yours. The difference is mine's already out. Slowly, Dennison moved his hand away. Colonel Garrett stood. Vincent Dennison, you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and murder. Surrender your weapon. For a long moment, Dennison didn't move. His eyes locked on Jonas. 30 years of history between them. You couldn't let it go, Dennison said quietly. After all this time. You killed Richard Kaine. You killed my brother. No, Vincent, I couldn't let it go. Dennison unbuckled his gun belt, let it fall. Guards moved in, took him by the arms. As they led him away, Dennison spoke over his shoulder. Octavia had nothing to do with this. She was following my orders. Jonas shook his head. No, she's not. But you're still trying to protect her. Even now. Dennison didn't respond. The guards marched him toward the detention building. Octavia tried to run, made it 10 feet before 2 veterans grabbed her. The tribunal reconvened quickly. Colonel Garrett took the chair Dennison had occupied. Jonas Kellerman, you have presented evidence of treason and murder. The tribunal finds this evidence credible and sufficient. Vincent Dennison and Octavia Dennison will be held for formal trial. He paused. As for Marlo Kaine, the evidence against her was clearly fabricated. All charges are dismissed. She is declared innocent. Garrett looked at Jonas. You completed 2 trials successfully. You invoked Article 12 correctly. And you've exposed corruption that goes to the highest levels of our organization. The tribunal thanks you for your service. I don't want thanks. I want justice for Richard Kaine. You'll have it. Dennison will face military tribunal. The evidence you've provided will be forwarded to Army intelligence and the FBI. When he's convicted, he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Jonas nodded slowly. And the girl? Miss Kaine is free to go. She's also entitled to full chapter membership if she wants it as the daughter of a decorated veteran. Garrett looked at Marlo. Do you accept? Marlo stepped forward, looked at the tribunal, at the assembled veterans, at the organization that had killed her father and tried to kill her. No, thank you, but no, I don't want anything from the order. She turned to Jonas. I just want to go home. Jonas holstered his pistol. picked up the metal case, took Marlo's arm. Then let's go home. They walked through the crowd. Men stepped aside to let them pass. Some nodded with respect. Others just stared. Jonas didn't care. He was done with this world. They reached the truck, climbed in. And as Jonas started the engine, Captain Morris approached. Jonas? A word. Jonas rolled down the window. Morris looked uncomfortable. I just wanted to say what you did, exposing Dennison. That took courage. You're looking now. That's what matters. Morris nodded. We're going to clean house. Make the order what it was supposed to be. Good luck with that. Will you help? We could use someone like you. Jonas looked at Morris, saw a good man trying to do the right thing. No, I'm done. Find someone younger, someone who still believes. Morris stepped back. If you change your mind, I won't. Jonas rolled up the window, drove away. In the rearview mirror, he watched Fort Bragg disappear. Marlo was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. You could have killed him, Dennison, when he reached for his gun. Yes. Why didn't you? Jonas kept his eyes on the road. Because I'm tired of killing, tired of violence, tired of everything ending in blood. He deserved it. Maybe, but I didn't deserve to carry another death. I've got enough ghosts already. They drove up into the mountains. The road climbed higher, the air getting colder. When they reached the cabin, the sun was setting, gold and red painting the sky. Jonas parked. They sat in the truck for a moment, neither moving. What happens now? Marlo asked. I don't know. I hadn't planned this far ahead. Can I stay here, in the mountains? Jonas looked at her. Why? Because I don't have anywhere else. And because, she paused, because you're the only family I have left. The only person who knew my father. The only person who fought for me when no one else would. Jonas was quiet for a long time. It's harsh up here. Cold winters, hard living. I know. And I'm not good at this, at family, at being anything other than what I am. I know that too. Jonas opened his door. There's a second cabin, smaller, about half a mile up the ridge. Your father and I built it years ago. It's weatherproof, has a stove. You could fix it up, make it yours. Marlo's eyes widened. Really? If you want, no pressure, you're free to leave anytime. She climbed out of the truck, looked around at the mountains, the trees, the vast silence. I want to stay. Jonas nodded. Then you stay. They spent the evening sorting through the cabin, finding supplies, blankets, tools. As darkness fell, Jonas built a fire in the wood stove. They sat at the table eating soup and bread. Jonas, yes. Thank you for everything. I kept a promise, that's all. No, it's more than that. You gave me back my father's name, his honor. You proved he wasn't wrong to stand up to Dennison. Jonas stared into his soup. Your father never compromised his principles. He deserved better than what he got. So did you. Jonas looked up, met her eyes. Maybe, he said quietly, but I made my choices. I live with them. Silence settled, comfortable, the kind of quiet that exists between people who've been through something together. Later, Marlo went to the bedroom. Jonas sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. He thought about Richard, about promises kept and promises broken, about whether any of it had mattered. He'd saved Marlo, exposed Dennison, done what he'd set out to do. His knee throbbed, his ribs ached, his hands shook. But he'd done it. The door opened behind him. Marlo stepped out wrapped in a blanket. Can't sleep. Too quiet. She sat on the porch steps. Will Dennison really go to prison? Yes, the evidence is overwhelming. Good. They sat in silence for a while. Jonas, what will you do now? Jonas considered the question. I don't know. I've spent my whole life fighting. I don't know how to do anything else. You could teach. Teach me. Teach what? How to kill. How to survive. How to stand up when everyone's against you. How to keep promises even when it costs everything. Jonas smiled, tired but genuine. Maybe that's something. A shooting star streaked across the sky. Marlo pointed. My mother used to tell me that shooting stars were souls going to heaven. Do you believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore, but it's a nice thought. Another silence. Then Marlo spoke, her voice small. Do you think my father would be proud of what I became, of how I survived? Jonas turned to look at her, saw the young woman who'd faced down a tribunal, who'd stood firm while men tried to kill her. Yes, Richard would be proud, more proud than you know. Marlo nodded, wiped her eyes. They sat together on the porch. Two survivors, two people bound by ghosts and promises. The stars wheeled overhead, the mountains stood eternal, and in their small cabin, two people who'd lost everything found something like peace. Not happiness, not redemption, just peace. Sometimes that was enough. Spring came to the Blue Ridge Mountains like a whisper. Snow-melted streams ran high and new growth pushed through the winter-dead earth. Jonas stood in the clearing behind his cabin watching Marlo work. She'd spent the winter fixing up the second cabin. Now she was planting a garden, vegetables mostly. She'd learned fast. How to split wood, how to read the weather, how to move through the forest without leaving a trail. All the skills Jonas had accumulated over 7 decades he was passing to her. Not because she needed to be a soldier, but because she deserved to be self-sufficient. He walked with a cane, now the old knee finally giving out. Moved slower. Some mornings he could barely get out of bed. But he was still here, still breathing, still teaching, a car engine in the distance. Unusual. Jonas moved to where he could see the access road. A jeep appeared, Captain Morris behind the wheel. The Western chapter officer Park climbed out. He looked older than 8 months ago. Jonas, Miss Kaine. Captain. Jonas didn't move from the porch. I have news. Thought you'd want to hear it in person. Jonas gestured to a chair. Morris sat. Dennison was convicted. All charges. He'll spend the rest of his life at Leavenworth. Jonas nodded slowly. And Octavia? 20 years. She cooperated with investigators, gave up her Soviet contacts. It helped reduce her sentence. Good. Morris pulled an envelope from his jacket. There's more. The Army reviewed Richard Kaine's death. In light of Dennison's conviction, they've officially changed the finding. Captain Kaine is now listed as killed in the line of duty. His name has been added to the memorial wipe at Arlington. He handed the envelope to Marlo. His medals have been restored. Silver Star, Purple Heart, all of them. They belong to you now. Marlo opened the envelope. Inside were medals Jonas remembered Richard wearing. Her hands shook as she held them. Thank you, she whispered. Morris stood. There's one more thing. The order is being restructured. New leadership, new oversight. We want to offer you both full chapter membership, full benefits, full protection. Jonas shook his head. No. Jonas, I said no. We're done with that world. Morris looked disappointed but not surprised. He turned to Marlo. Miss Kaine. Marlo looked at the medals in her hands, at the cabin she'd built, at Jonas sitting on the porch, old and scarred and free. No, thank you, but no. Morris nodded. I understand, but if you ever change your minds. We won't, Jonas said. Morris walked back to his jeep, paused before getting in. For what it's worth, Jonas. What you did changed everything. The order is better now. Cleaner. We're actually helping veterans again. Good, but that's your fight now, not mine. Morris climbed in, started the engine. If you need anything, we won't. The jeep drove away, disappeared into the trees. Marlo sat on the porch steps holding her father's medals, tears running down her face. Jonas didn't speak, just sat with her. Let her grieve. After a while, Jonas went inside, returned with a yellowed envelope. Your father wrote this, June 1948, the day before he was killed. He handed it to Marlo. I kept it all these years, couldn't bring myself to destroy it, couldn't bring myself to give it to you until now. Marlo opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a letter in neat handwriting. My dearest Marlo, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But know that I fought for something worth dying for. Truth, honor. The belief that good men can make a difference. I trust Jonas Kellerman with my life and yours. He's a hard man, but a good one. If he's watching over you, you're safe. Listen to him, learn from him, and forgive him if he seems distant. Some men show love through action, not words. Be strong, little one. Be brave. Be better than I was. Your father, Richard. Marlo read it twice, 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Jonas stood silent, hands in pockets, looking at the mountains. Finally, Marlo folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. He knew, she whispered. He knew you'd protect me. Jonas nodded. He knew I'd try. You did more than try. You succeeded. Jonas looked at her. Did I? You grew up alone, afraid I could have done more. You did enough. Marlo stood, walked to Jonas, put her hand on his arm. You kept your promise. That's what matters. They stood together, looking out at the mountains, 2 people bound by a dead man's trust. And somehow, against all odds, that was enough. After a moment, Marlo wiped her eyes. Jonas, can I ask you something? Yes. Do you have regrets about how you lived your life? Jonas looked out at the mountains, at the vast silence. Many regrets, he said quietly. Too many to count. But but I kept my promise to Richard, and that matters more than the rest. Marlo nodded. She went inside, came back with a small wooden box Jonas recognized. His medals. She set it on the table next to her father's letter and medals. We should display these. Both of you earned them. They're just metal and ribbon. No, they're proof that you mattered, that you both mattered. Jonas looked at the boxes, at the decades of service they represented. Do what you want with them, he said. I don't need reminders. Marlo took both boxes inside. A moment later, Jonas heard the sound of hammer on nail. She was hanging them where they could be seen. He didn't go in to look. Didn't need to. Some things were better left to the next generation. Jonas sat alone on the porch. He didn't know how many years he had left. Maybe 5, maybe 10 if he was lucky. But however many remained, he'd spend them here, in the mountains, teaching Marlo, keeping Richard's daughter safe. He closed his eyes, felt the spring sun on his face, heard Marlo moving inside the cabin. The phantom was gone now, replaced by an old man who'd finally found something worth more than fighting. Peace, purpose, family. It was enough.